June 1944, Normandy. A Tiger tank stands silent in the hedgerows near Villers-Bocage, its engine hissing, its crew staring helplessly at smoke curling from the rear deck. It had not been hit, only driven too far. According to British War Office report WO2 91-1186, fewer than 4 of every 10 Tigers in France were operational at any given time. The rest were crippled by transmission failures, jammed steering clutches or overheated engines. Yet in Allied briefings, the Tiger remained a phantom of fear, invincible, unstoppable. When American ordnance inspectors reached abandoned German armor later that summer, they found more broken machines than destroyed ones. One report concluded bluntly, "The Tiger's gun kills, but its transmission kills itself first." In contrast, U.S. Army records show the M4 Sherman maintained an 85% readiness rate across the European theater. Albert Speer himself admitted Germany's industrial sin: "We built masterpieces, but not machines of war." Each Tiger demanded more than 300,000 man-hours to produce, 5 times the labor of a Sherman. Every loss was irreplaceable, every breakdown a strategic wound. By probability alone, a Tiger was more likely to die of its own mechanics than of enemy fire. Yet its myth endured, inflated by propaganda and fear. The truth, written in ordnance logs and battlefield reports, tells another story, that the most feared weapon of Hitler's armies was often its own undoing. To understand how the legend of German armored superiority collapsed beneath its own engineering, we must look beyond battlefield bravado to the documented failures buried in the war's technical archives. Before Normandy, the myth was already written. From the fall of France in 1940 to the gates of Moscow in 1941, German Panzers seemed to embody invincibility. Blitzkrieg had crushed armies twice their size in half the time predicted. In 6 weeks, France, once thought impregnable behind the Maginot Line, had fallen to just over 2,500 German tanks. The lesson appeared clear: superior machines, superior men. In Berlin, General Heinz Guderian shaped the armored creed. "Quality, not quantity, will secure victory," he wrote in 1942, his words preserved in Panzer Leader. German industry followed that commandment. Designers refined the Panzer IV into precision art. Thicker armor, better optics, meticulous tolerances. When the Tiger I appeared on the Eastern Front in late 1942, its 80mm gun could pierce any Allied tank at over a mile. Nazi propaganda christened it Der unbesiegbare Panzer, the invincible tank. Reports from Kursk in July 1943 reinforced the legend. Soviet gunners spoke of shells bouncing like pebbles from Tiger armor. German officers believed they had mastered mechanized war itself. Even as engines overheated and gearboxes groaned, the Wehrmacht's high command dismissed complaints as the cost of greatness. By late 1943, intercepted German transmissions revealed a tone of near arrogance. One officer boasted, "We could drive through any line the Allies build." British intelligence analysts in MI10 noted, "German confidence borders on technical arrogance." What the Wehrmacht could not see, what their own engineers feared, was that each step toward perfection added hours of maintenance, tons of steel and months of delay. The army that once prized speed was building monuments instead of weapons. While German designers polished gears and optics, American engineers were forging something far less glamorous and infinitely more practical. The myth of superiority was set, but in the factories of Detroit, its undoing had already begun. In 1942, the United States entered the armored race already behind. German tanks dominated headlines, and the M4 Sherman was dismissed by critics before its tracks even touched Europe. Its 75mm gun seemed too light, its armor too thin. British crews joked grimly that it brewed up like a Ronson lighter. Yet behind that reputation lay a secret advantage, one built not in laboratories, but on assembly lines. At Detroit's vast tank arsenal, American engineers traded elegance for efficiency. Each Sherman shared interchangeable parts, gearboxes, tracks, road wheels that could be swapped in minutes. According to U.S. Ordnance records, a new Sherman rolled off the line every 10 days, maintained an 85% operational rate, and could be repaired in the field with a wrench, not a crane. Where German Tigers demanded elite crews and constant overhaul, the Sherman asked only fuel and ammunition. Its 500-horsepower Continental engine endured 500 hours before rebuild, 5 times longer than a Tiger's Maybach HL230. Even the Army's logistics officers, once skeptical, began to see the pattern. General Jacob Devers summarized it best. "We win not by perfection, but persistence." For every Tiger prowling the hedgerows, a dozen Shermans could surround it, refuel, and return to battle. Critics saw weakness in simplicity. Engineers saw strategy in standardization. By 1944, while Germany built masterpieces one by one, America built armies by the hour. The myth of underdog armor would soon face its first true test, not on the factory floor, but on the battlefields of France. While Germany pursued mechanical elegance, America built a war machine from pragmatism. In 1943, the U.S. Ordnance Department issued a directive that would redefine the battlefield. Every component of the M4 Sherman, engine, suspension, even its bolts, must be interchangeable across factories. What began as bureaucratic foresight became wartime genius. At the Detroit Arsenal, engineers under General Gladian Barnes tested reliability under abuse, grinding engines for days, driving tanks until bolts snapped. Their findings shaped the Easy 8 upgrade, improved HVSS suspension for smoother rides, wet stowage ammunition to prevent catastrophic fires, and a higher velocity 76mm gun. These refinements, rolled out in 1944, gave crews speed, stability, and safety unmatched by any Axis design. Meanwhile, British workshops collaborated with American engineers to mount their potent 17-pounder gun into Sherman hulls, creating the Firefly. When tested in 1944, it proved capable of piercing a Tiger's frontal armor at over 1,000 yards, an innovation born not from obsession, but cooperation. Eisenhower himself endorsed the doctrine, "Give me a tank that runs every day, not one that runs only when pampered." That philosophy powered a vast logistical empire. Field depots that rebuilt tanks overnight, rail convoys delivering engines like spare shoes, and mechanics who could strip and reassemble an M4 in hours. According to Ordnance data, nearly 80% of damaged Shermans in the European theatre returned to combat within 48 hours. Contrast that with Germany's armoured elite, which often abandoned tanks for lack of parts or fuel. The U.S. Army's secret weapon was not a new gun or thicker armor, it was predictability. Every Sherman could share parts, tools, and training. A tank crew in Normandy could receive a replacement transmission built in Michigan and have it installed before dawn. By 1944, America's advantage was not technical superiority, but reliability engineered at industrial scale. The Tiger might dominate in theory, but wars are not won by theory. They are won by machines that move, fight, and return the next morning ready to do it again. By June 1944, the stage for the armor war in Normandy was set and uneven. On paper, the Wehrmacht still fielded elite divisions. Panzerlehr boasted 200 tanks, including Panthers and Tigers, freshly painted and crewed by veterans. Yet the same morning those tanks rolled toward Caen. Their fuel convoys were bombed to dust by Allied fighter bombers. German command logs record it coldly. Only half of vehicles reached deployment point. Across the Channel, American and British supply officers were choreographing an industrial ballet. The Red Ball Express, 15,000 trucks and drivers, many African-American soldiers, hauled fuel, ammunition, and spare parts to the front 24 hours a day. Quartermaster files from July 1944 note, "Fuel moves faster than steel. It was logistics as warfare, and the Allies were winning before firing a shot." Meanwhile, German armor staggered forward through fields turned to mud by rain and bombardment. Rommel warned Berlin, "Our tanks are lions in cages without fuel." His prediction proved literal. By early July, Panzerlehr listed fewer than 90 operational tanks. Half were immobilized awaiting parts. The 503rd Heavy Battalion's Tiger IIs, each consuming 700 liters per 100 kilometers, became immovable fortresses, formidable but fixed. In contrast, U.S. 3rd Armored Division units maneuvered freely, guided by radio-linked command cars and repair crews who shadowed them. After-action reports show a Sherman disabled in the morning often returned to battle the next day. Both sides were in position, but only one could move when the time came. The Germans waited for perfection. The Americans prepared for continuity. The battlefield was ready, and the myth of German engineering was about to meet the unstoppable rhythm of American logistics. September 19, 1944. Fog lay thick across Lorraine, cloaking the French fields in a grey silence that hid death. From the mist rolled Germany's last armoured hope, the newly formed Panzer brigades, their Panthers gleaming with oil and expectation. Their orders were simple: smash through the thin American line around Arracourt and reclaim the initiative lost in Normandy. What followed became a lesson in engineering versus adaptability. At dawn, U.S. 4th Armored Division tankers peered into the haze and saw shadows moving, sleek silhouettes of Panthers advancing blindly. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion, ordered his Shermans to hold fire until muzzle flashes appeared. The moment they did, the fog erupted with lightning. For all their firepower, the Panthers were deaf and blind. German records describe confusion. Visibility 10 meters. Engines fail, radios weak, coordination impossible. The terrain favored the lighter Shermans, which darted between hedgerows and fired point-blank before vanishing again. Within hours, 25 Panthers burned. Abrams later wrote, "They had better guns, but we could move, and movement wins wars." American mobility and radio discipline turned chaos into coordination. Each platoon communicated fluidly, calling artillery and airstrikes with precision impossible for their foes. By September 22nd, German supply lines were collapsing. Fuel trucks lay ambushed or stuck in mud. Repair units couldn't reach broken Panthers. Out of 262 tanks committed, fewer than half returned to base. Many were simply abandoned, engines seized, or tracks thrown. The U.S. Zoo Corps after-action report concluded the enemy was defeated as much by his machines as by ours. When the fog lifted, the fields around Arracourt were littered with burned hulks, testaments not to German weakness, but to mechanical fragility under real war conditions. Shermans, though battered and outgunned, stood ready to move again by dawn. The battle shattered the illusion of German armoured invincibility. Power without reliability had met precision without complexity, and lost. As one American tanker said while passing a gutted Panther, "All that steel, and it still couldn't make it to the fight." By winter 1944, the German armoured force was disintegrating from within. In the Ardennes, Hitler's final gamble, the Battle of the Bulge, unfolded under the illusion that his tanks could still spearhead victory. They could not. Records from the 506th Heavy Tank Battalion show that within the first 10 days, 45 of their 150 Tiger IIs broke down before contact with the enemy. Some never left assembly points, their transmissions failing in the snow. Fuel starvation finished what engineering flaws began. Allied bombing severed refineries and rail lines, reducing German reserves to a fraction of pre-war levels. One Panzer officer recorded bitterly, "We feared the breakdown more than the enemy shell." Captured communications, later analyzed by US G2, paint a grim pattern: crews abandoning tanks intact, commanders ordering self-destruction to prevent capture. Even the once revered Tiger II, weighing 70 tons, became a liability. Its immense Maybach engine devoured 700 liters per 100 kilometers. Many battalions simply couldn't move. Albert Speer admitted in post-war testimony, "Our industry became a monument to inefficiency." The assembly of a single Tiger required over 300,000 man-hours. By 1945, Germany could not afford the labor, steel, or fuel to sustain its armored dreams. Guderian summarized the futility. The Panzers could not be fueled by hope. When American reconnaissance reached the Siegfried Line in March 1945, they found roads lined with burned-out hulks, many untouched by combat. German soldiers, demoralized and out of parts, left notes inside. No oil, no orders. The shock was total. What had begun as the symbol of blitzkrieg ended as a trail of rusting monuments to over-engineering. Germany's tanks had once terrified nations. Now they could not even move to surrender. By spring 1945, the once formidable German Panzer force existed mostly on paper. Intelligence summaries from the U.S. Army's General Board listed fewer than 500 operational tanks left on the Western Front, most scattered, immobile, or without fuel. Against them, the Allies fielded more than 7,000 vehicles, a 15-to-1 advantage that rendered tactics irrelevant. The decisive factor was not firepower, but endurance. When American and British forces crossed the Rhine in March, armored columns advanced almost without resistance. General Omar Bradley later remarked, "We fought their tanks with time and torque." Where Germany had built perfection, America had built persistence. U.S. maintenance depots restored 80% of damaged Shermans to combat readiness, while German workshops, crippled by bombing and shortages, returned fewer than 1 in 10. Propaganda headlines captured the irony. Stars and Stripes declared tigers tamed by tools and time. What had once symbolized fear now represented futility. Even Albert Speer, in a final memorandum to Hitler, wrote, "No more steel, no more fuel, no more miracles." Captured Wehrmacht documents reveal commanders pleading for bicycles to replace lost vehicles. Meanwhile, Allied supply trains still delivered spare engines, transmissions, and tracks by the hour. Every mile marched eastward illustrated a truth the war had proven. Reliability beats brilliance when brilliance cannot move. By April, the Ruhr pocket closed, trapping what remained of Germany's mechanized army. Crews abandoned tanks along the Autobahn, often intact but powerless. When U.S. Ordnance inspectors examined them weeks later, they found empty fuel tanks, broken gearboxes, and notes scrawled on dashboards, "No oil." No orders, no hope. The war of machines was over, and the simpler one had won. When the guns fell silent in 1945, the engineers began to speak. Allied research teams descended on captured German factories and test grounds, measuring armor plates, dissecting transmissions, and cataloguing every flaw that had doomed the Reich's armored corps. What they discovered reshaped modern warfare. At Fort Knox, the U.S. Army Armor Board issued its 1946 verdict, "Mobility is survivability." Tanks that could start, steer and sustain fire under strain had outlasted those that dazzled on paper. The Sherman, derided during the war, became a model for post-war design. Its DNA carried into the M26 Pershing and later the M48 Patton, both emphasizing accessible engines, simplified repair, and mass production. Across the Atlantic, British analysts reached similar conclusions. Their 1947 War Office report called the German Tiger a work of art, the American tank a weapon. The phrase encapsulated a doctrinal shift from craftsmanship to functionality. Germany's obsession with precision had sacrificed reliability. America's pursuit of practicality had delivered endurance. Even the Soviets, examining Panthers at Kubinka, recognized the paradox. They admired the gun but rejected the complexity, choosing instead to refine the T-34 concept into the T-54, rugged, cheap, and repairable in the field. The lesson was universal. Wars reward efficiency, not extravagance. Academic circles echoed the same theme. West Point's 1948 curriculum taught that Industrial warfare favors the nation that builds what it can fix. Decades later, NATO strategy manuals would trace that doctrine back to the muddy lanes of Normandy and the Fog of Arracourt. Historian Adam Tooze summarized it with brutal elegance. Germany built monuments to its genius and to its defeat. The Tiger and Panther remain museum icons, symbols of brilliance without sustainability. The Sherman, less glamorous but endlessly dependable, became the blueprint for victory in the age of mechanized logistics. The legacy was clear. Reliability had triumphed over reputation, and the true revolution of tank warfare lay not in steel thickness, but in the philosophy of motion. When the war ended, the numbers told their verdict. German tank design had achieved brilliance and bankruptcy. The Tiger's mechanical readiness stood at 37%, the Panthers at 54%, while the American Sherman held at 85%. For every Tiger built, 5 Shermans rolled off Allied lines, and 4 of them reached the front still running. Captured German reports revealed that nearly 60% of their armor had been lost not to enemy fire, but to breakdowns, empty fuel tanks, or abandonment. The myth of the unstoppable Panzer had been sustained by fear and film more than by fact. As the British War Office concluded in 1946, the myth of invincibility was a triumph of fear, not fact. General Eisenhower put it more plainly. The strength of America lies not in its machines, but in the men who keep them moving. Behind every Sherman stood mechanics, drivers and supply clerks, the quiet architects of victory. Their success redefined modern warfare. A machine's true power lies not in its thickness of armor, but in its ability to keep fighting day after day. Decades later, historians still find poetry in the paradox. The Tiger roared louder, but the Sherman lasted longer. Germany built masterpieces. America built momentum. The war proved that reliability is the highest form of genius. The lesson endures. In any era, the weapon that works tomorrow will always defeat the one that failed today.